The rain hadn't stopped all week. It tapped softly against the windows of Ben's bedroom as he sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, surrounded by boxes that still smelled like mothballs and mildew. His grandfather had passed just 10 days ago, peacefully in his sleep, they said. But Ben hadn't believed that. Not for a second. The old man had been sharp, unnervingly so. Even in his final years, Grandpa Eli always seemed like he was keeping one eye on something no one else could see, something that made his hands tremble when he thought no one was watching. Ben never really knew the man. Their visits were rare and always strange, filled with stories that blurred the line between history and hallucination. But what he did know was this: his grandfather never let anyone touch the radio. It arrived in a dented crate, wrapped in yellowing newspaper and burlap, like something rescued from the belly of a sunken ship. It didn't look like much, just a heavy, walnut-paneled tabletop radio with cracked knobs and a tuning dial that squeaked when you turned it. A relic from a different century. There was no note, just the radio and a small, leather-bound journal tucked in the bottom of the box. The journal's first page read, "Do not tune past 1160. Ever. E." Ben felt an unexplainable chill crawl up his spine. But he couldn't resist. That night, while the house creaked and groaned with its usual nighttime noises, Ben sat on the edge of his bed, the radio resting on his desk like some old deity waiting to be awakened. He plugged it in. Nothing. He adjusted the dial. A low hum buzzed from the speaker, followed by bursts of white noise and crackling static. Then, faintly, a voice. Fire started near the coal seam. Death toll is expected to rise. Ben blinked. The voice was male, smooth, clipped, like an old-timey radio announcer. But there was something wrong with it. The phrasing, the urgency. He Googled the phrase, and after a few minutes of searching, his heart began to race. The broadcast was describing a mining town disaster, one that had happened in 1952. Confused, maybe a little spooked, he turned the dial again. More static. A woman crying. A child's lullaby. Silence. Then it came, a girl's voice, barely more than a whisper. "Please, can anyone hear me? They're still in the mine. We're trapped." Ben froze. Her voice was ragged and real. Not like a recording, not like an old radio show. She sounded terrified. And then, just before the static swallowed her whole, she said something that made his blood run cold. "Tell Eli. Tell him it's still here." Ben stared at the radio, the room suddenly impossibly still. No footsteps in the hall. No wind outside. Just the low hum of something ancient and waiting. The tuning dial glowed softly in the dark, like an eye just beginning to open. And on the desk, the leather journal lay open to a new page. One that hadn't been blank before. "You heard her. Now you have to listen." The girl's voice haunted Ben's dreams for days. She'd sounded so close, so alive, even though the static had swallowed her like the dark between heartbeats. He couldn't stop thinking about it. About her. About the name she whispered. Eli. Ben's grandfather. The journal offered no answers, just scrawled entries that teetered between the paranoid and prophetic. Scribbled frequency ranges. Names of people Ben didn't recognize. A recurring phrase in shaking ink. "It's not gone. Just buried." So Ben did what he always did when he had a question no one would answer. He searched online. Late into the night, the glow of the screen lit up his tired eyes as he dug through archives, blog posts, and newspaper scans so grainy they looked like ghosts themselves. It wasn't easy, but he finally found it. Darrington, West Virginia. a mining town swallowed by the earth in 1952. Official cause: a methane explosion deep in the mine shaft. Casualties: 48 dead, including 3 children and the mayor. The entire north end of the town collapsed into a sinkhole and was declared uninhabitable. The government closed the mine, evacuated the survivors, and by 1954 erased the town from maps entirely. But then Ben found something stranger. There were no after photos, no documentation of demolition or cleanup, no survivor interviews. Nothing past a 2-week flurry of reports, then silence, like someone had slammed the file shut and locked it in a drawer. And in one scanned article, half-burned and uploaded by a local history blogger, he spotted a grainy photo of the mayor's last public appearance. Standing beside him was a woman in a dress and cardigan, her hair done in a 1950s beehive, smiling, hand on her rounded stomach. Ben's heart skipped. It was his mother, or someone who looked exactly like her. The caption read, Mayor Harlan Walters and local school teacher Grace Wilder, shortly before the dedication ceremony. June 1952. Ben felt his world tilt. His mother had always refused to talk about her side of the family. She claimed she was born in Cincinnati. She never spoke about Grandpa Eli unless forced to. And when he asked about the radio that night, what it was, where it came from, she shut him down fast, her face going pale. He hadn't pushed. But now, he turned the radio back on. Static hissed from the speaker like it was breathing. Then came voices, layered, overlapping, half screamed, half sung, fragments of memories bleeding through the airwaves. They said the ground opened up like a mouth. Can't see anything. It's all black. It's all black. He knew. Eli knew. Then a name he hadn't heard before, but that sent a jolt down his spine anyway. Wilder. He sat frozen as the voice repeated it, slower this time. Grace Wilder. He slammed the radio off. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky, and in the hallway, a floorboard creaked like someone had taken a single, deliberate step. Ben didn't sleep that night. Instead, he watched the window until dawn, wondering if maybe the past hadn't been buried at all. Maybe it had just been waiting. It started with his name. At first, Ben told himself it was coincidence. Just a fluke of noise, a trick of the static. Radios could glitch, signals could overlap, right? But it wasn't just once. 3 days after hearing Grace Wilder, the radio spoke again. This time, the voice was low and calm. Male, like a newscaster from decades ago reading something off a sheet. In other news, Benjamin Wilder was last seen leaving his home at approximately 8:46 p.m. Ben dropped the spoonful of cereal he'd been about to eat. Milk splashed across the table. He lunged for the radio, twisting the knob, but the station was gone, swallowed up by a burst of static. He hadn't left the house last night. He hadn't even planned to. And yet, when he looked at the microwave clock, it read 8:46 a.m., almost exactly 12 hours from the time the voice had mentioned. His palms began to sweat. He left the radio unplugged for 2 days after that. But the voices didn't stop. They started to bleed through other things. The baby monitor in his neighbor's yard. The white noise between YouTube ads. Once, while he was brushing his teeth, the static fuzz from the bathroom vent whispered, Ben, he knows you're listening now. He turned the radio back on, almost desperately. And it answered, Ben, you shouldn't have looked her up. You can't change what's been promised. Ben stumbled backward. His knees hit the edge of his desk, knocking the journal to the floor. It flipped open without his hand touching it. The page had new ink on it. 7 days. Bedroom. fire. He couldn't breathe. Was it a prank? A sick game? Had someone hacked the radio? Was Tyler messing with him? The next morning, he woke up to smoke in his room. He leapt out of bed, heart slamming, only to find a burning candle toppled onto a stack of notebooks beside his desk. He'd forgotten to blow it out the night before. The damage was minimal, a blackened cover, a scorch mark on the desk, but the message was not. It could have spread. It should have. That night, the voice returned, soft and eerily gentle. 6 days now. Don't waste them. Ben unplugged the radio again. This time, the hum didn't stop. The hum had become a constant presence. Even unplugged, the radio seemed to emit a soft, impossible vibration, like a held breath, just beneath the surface of hearing. Ben started keeping it covered with a blanket, but he could still feel it, like a second heartbeat in the room. It didn't want to be ignored. And one night, it finally refused to be. It was past midnight. The world was asleep, and Ben was staring blankly at his bedroom ceiling, ears trained on the silence. Then the static started again, soft at first, then rising. He didn't plug the radio in. He didn't touch it. It powered itself. The dial glowed. Wait, JJ. At first, it was just the usual garbled whispers and overlapping voices, snippets of tragedies and forgotten moments. But then a woman's voice cut through it, clear, distinct, and close. Ben, don't be afraid. He sat bolt upright. The voice was gentle, but it carried weight, like it wasn't coming from the speaker, but through it. I don't have long. They're always listening. But I can help you. You have to keep listening. Ben's hands trembled. Who are you? He whispered. Marla. The name settled in the air like dust. Ben searched his mind, but it meant nothing. And yet, something about the voice felt familiar, like a song he used to know by heart. Your grandfather didn't die of old age. He tried to warn them. He tried to stop it, but he broke the pact. Ben leaned closer. The static was rising again, like interference, like something else wanted to push through. The radio wasn't built, Marla said quickly. It was found, buried beneath the mine, before the collapse, before they woke up. They? The listeners. And then, like a door slamming in a storm, her voice cut out. Static roared, and for a second, Ben saw something move inside the radio. Behind the dial. A shadow. A shape. When it died down, he stared into the speaker like it might blink back. His hands moved without thinking, flipping through the journal, looking for her name. He didn't find it, but he found a photograph, tucked between 2 pages, curled at the edges. Black and white. A young woman in a knee-length coat, standing beside a truck with Wilder's Garage stenciled on the side. She was smiling, and the back of the photo read, Marla, Summer, 52, right before she vanished. Ben stared at it for a long time, goosebumps rising along his arms. His grandfather's first love, gone without a trace. And now, somehow, whispering from a radio that had no right to work. He turned the dial gently, almost reverently. The static cleared for half a breath, and in that space, her voice returned. Promise me something, Ben. What? When the fire comes, don't trust the ones who stay quiet. Things started to slip. It wasn't anything dramatic at first. The air in Ben's room felt colder, like someone had left a door open into another world. He'd shiver without reason, his skin prickling even when the room was warm. And the strange noises began, whispers faint enough to pass as the wind, yet persistent enough to make him check the corners of the room in the dark. It wasn't just the radio now. It was everything. One evening, after a long day of searching for more clues in his grandfather's journal, Ben came home to find his mother standing in the kitchen, staring out the window, her expression vacant. "Mom?" he called, walking in. "You okay?" She didn't respond at first, but then, slowly, her head turned to him. Her eyes were glassy, distant. "I was just thinking about the past," she said, her voice strange. She sounded as if she hadn't heard herself speak in years. "It's been a while since I thought about it." Ben felt his chest tighten. "What are you talking about?" he asked. But his mother only shook her head, the moment breaking as quickly as it had come. She turned back to the window. "Nothing. Forget I said anything." That night, Ben heard something scratching at his door. He sat up, heart racing. The scratching was faint at first, like nails on wood, but it grew louder, more insistent, until it was like something was trying to claw its way through the door. Ben didn't dare open it, paralyzed with fear. Then, the door handle jiggled. He could hear it clearly now. Someone or something on the other side. "Mom?" he called out, voice shaky. The noise stopped. Ben moved toward the door, cautiously, but when he opened it, the hallway was empty. There was no sign of his mother. She was already in bed, sound asleep. A book dropped on the floor beside her. He closed the door, heart thumping, wondering if he'd imagined it. But that night, when he laid back in his bed, the whispers returned. This time, they weren't in the corners of the room. They were in the walls, behind the wallpaper, in the space between the wood beams. They spoke in soft murmurs, distant voices from another era. Then, clear as day, he heard it. "You're not alone, Ben." He jerked upright, eyes wide. The static on the radio was louder now. A low, vibrating hum, almost like a growl. It came from the corner of the room where the radio sat. Ben got up quickly, his heart racing. He turned the dial. We couldn't leave, trapped in the past. He froze. The voice sounded so familiar. It was his own voice, soft and distant, almost as if it were coming from a place far beyond the room. Not from the speaker, but from behind the walls. He turned the dial again. "They're waiting for you, Ben." The room grew colder still. Ben's breath fogged the air as the whispering voices intensified, layering on top of each other. Some were old, some were new, some were familiar, but all of them were present. They were in the house, and they were coming closer. Then came the loudest sound of all, the scraping of metal against metal. Ben spun around. A strange shadow passed across the wall, elongated and distorted, like something had slipped through the crack of the doorway. His eyes locked onto his reflection in the mirror hanging on the wall. But his reflection wasn't quite right. There, standing behind him, was a girl in a poodle skirt, her features pale and blurry, like an old photograph left out in the sun for too long. She was staring at him, unblinking. Ben slammed his hand against the mirror, desperate to wake himself from this nightmare. When he looked again, the girl was gone, but the mirror had a single, new crack running across its surface. "I'm here, Ben. Always have been." Ben's pulse roared in his ears. The radio crackled louder, the voices rising to a maddening crescendo. There was no more denying it. Whatever was leaking into the present, it was no longer content to stay hidden in the static. Ben couldn't shake the feeling that time was closing in on him, pushing him further into the corners of a nightmare he couldn't wake from. The girl in the poodle skirt had haunted him ever since, her face still imprinted in his mind like a warning. It wasn't just a random hallucination. He knew that now. It was part of something deeper, something ancient, and he needed answers. His grandfather's journal was the only thread he had left to cling to. The pages were brittle, the ink faded, but there was a pattern in the madness of his notes, a pattern he could no longer ignore. It was on a rainy evening, while flipping through the journal's brittle pages, that Ben found the first clear piece of the puzzle. A phrase, one he'd seen before but never understood. The pact has been made. Blood must be paid. Ben's pulse quickened. The phrase was scrawled hastily, as if his grandfather had written it in a rush. The ink was smeared, as though he'd written it through a haze of fear. But it was the rest of the entry that made Ben freeze. His grandfather, Benjamin Wilder, S.R., was one of the original miners who had discovered the cursed radio in the mines beneath the town of Wilder's Hollow. The discovery had been no accident. The radio had been buried for a reason. According to his grandfather's notes, the radio had not been created by man, it had been found. And the group of miners who had unearthed it were bound to it by an unspoken promise. It was a pact. As Ben turned the pages, more details began to emerge, dark and cryptic. The radio wasn't just a device for listening to the past. It was a conduit, an ancient artifact that could pull memories, voices, and even souls from the ether, creating a bridge between worlds. But the cost was steep. The pact demanded that one descendant from each of the original bloodlines must be sacrificed to keep the radio's power flowing. The souls of the miners and their descendants had been marked. Their fate was sealed by a decision made long ago, buried beneath the ashes of the mine collapse that had supposedly erased Wilder's Hollow from the map. Ben's fingers shook as he read the rest of the entry aloud. The pact was made. No one escapes it. The voices will come, one by one, until the last bloodline is consumed. He stopped, breathing shallowly, eyes wide. It felt as if the walls of his room were closing in. The voices weren't just haunting him. They were claiming him. But why him? Why now? And then came the chilling realization. The radio wasn't meant for Ben. It was meant for someone else, someone still alive. Someone who was watching him. Someone who had been a part of this, perhaps without even knowing it. He turned the page, desperate to uncover more. There it was. A name. Tyler Wilder, Bloodline Keeper. Ben's heart skipped a beat. Tyler. His best friend. Ben had assumed Tyler's family was just another part of the town's history, his connection to Wilder's Hollow no different than his own. But it wasn't a coincidence. Tyler's bloodline was tied to the pact. His family had been watching Ben all along. The radio hadn't been meant for Ben. It had been meant for Tyler. Ben slammed the journal shut, his mind racing. Tyler had been playing a part in all of this, just like the pact demanded. But why hadn't he told him? Why hadn't he warned him? Ben needed to confront him. He had to know the truth, before it was too late. As he stood up to leave, the radio crackled to life again. This time, it was louder than before, a chorus of voices, all speaking in unison. The time has come, Ben. Don't trust Tyler. He's been watching. You were never meant to survive. Ben froze, the words sinking into his bones. The pact was real, and it had already started to claim him. Ben couldn't sleep that night. The weight of the journal's final revelation hung over him like a storm cloud. Tyler had been watching him. Tyler's family had been watching him. All along. The thought made his skin crawl. He knew he had to confront him. He couldn't keep living under this shadow of secrecy. His best friend, the guy he had known since childhood, the one who had been by his side through thick and thin, was part of this dark, twisted legacy. A legacy that had been sealed decades ago, buried beneath the rubble of a forgotten mine. He needed answers, and he needed them now. It was early morning when Ben finally made his decision. The shadows outside were still long. the sky a dull gray as he grabbed his coat and made his way to Tyler's house. He didn't want to waste another minute, not when he felt time slipping away from him like sand through his fingers. When he arrived, the front door was open, as if Tyler had been expecting him. Ben didn't hesitate. He stepped inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. "Tyler?" Ben called out, his voice barely above a whisper. No response. He moved through the hall, the floorboards creaking beneath his feet. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Ben reached the living room and froze. Tyler was sitting on the couch, his hands folded in his lap, his gaze directed at the floor. His expression was blank, unreadable. He didn't even look up when Ben entered the room. "Tyler," Ben repeated, his voice shaking now. "We need to talk." Tyler finally raised his head, and when he did, Ben's heart skipped a beat. There was something different about him. His eyes were too still, too calm, like they were empty, as if whatever made Tyler had been stripped away. Tyler gave a slow, almost knowing smile. "I figured you'd come," he said softly. "I guess the truth was bound to catch up with you eventually." Ben's throat tightened. "What truth?" Tyler stood up, moving with a fluidity that felt unnatural. "The pact, Ben. The one that's been hanging over both of us for generations. You've always known, haven't you? Even when you tried to deny it." Ben's mind raced. "You." He couldn't finish the sentence. His stomach twisted. "You thought I was just your best friend, right?" Tyler's voice was calm, matter of fact. "But I've always known. It was my job, my family's duty, to keep an eye on you, to make sure the pact was fulfilled. And now, well, it's time." Ben took a step back, his pulse hammering in his ears. "What do you mean it's time? What's going to happen to me?" Tyler's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. "You're part of the deal now. You've been marked. And if you think the voices on that radio are just tricks, you're wrong. They're real. They're always watching. They're waiting for us to fulfill the pact." Ben shook his head, disbelieving. "You've been sabotaging me. All this time, you knew what was going on, and you didn't tell me? You lied to me?" Tyler stepped closer, his voice cold. "I didn't lie, Ben. I just didn't tell you everything. You were never supposed to find out. But you did. You started asking questions. That's why they're coming for you." Ben's world tilted as the full weight of Tyler's words hit him. His best friend wasn't just involved. He had been part of it all along, part of the plan to drag Ben into the same twisted fate his grandfather had tried to escape. Tyler wasn't just watching Ben. He was the one who had been ensuring the curse remained intact. Ben backed away, his legs trembling. "What do you want from me?" Tyler's smile returned, thin and calculated. "You don't have a choice anymore. The radio, the voices, they're already part of you. All that's left is for you to accept your place. You can't escape it. None of us can." As Tyler reached into his jacket pocket, Ben's heart slammed in his chest. His mind screamed. This is it. This is where everything changes. Tyler pulled out a small, silver object, a key. But it wasn't just any key. It was shaped like the dial of the radio, intricate and old. A key that looked like it had been forged decades ago. A key that belonged to something far darker than a simple piece of metal. "I've been waiting for this," Tyler murmured, his voice soft and almost loving. "For the moment, you'd finally understand. For the moment, you'd finally stop running." Ben's throat tightened, and panic surged through him. The key. It wasn't just a key to the radio. It was a key to everything. A key to the end of his life, to the fulfillment of the pact. Tyler's eyes gleamed, his smile widening. I'm sorry, Ben, but you were always meant to be part of this. It's already too late. Ben's heart thudded in his chest, the noise deafening as Tyler's words echoed in his mind. You were always meant to be part of this. The key in Tyler's hand gleamed in the dim light, its cold metal reflecting the terror in Ben's eyes. It was a cruel symbol of the fate that awaited him, a fate that had already been sealed by a pact he couldn't escape. Give me that, Ben demanded, his voice hoarse with a mix of fear and anger. You don't understand. This is wrong. I never agreed to any of this. Tyler's smile was empty, and for the first time, there was something almost hollow in his eyes. You don't have to agree, Ben. You were never given a choice. The pact chose you. The voices are already inside you. With trembling hands, Ben backed away, desperate to put distance between himself and the key, the radio, the nightmare that was closing in around him. He couldn't let Tyler drag him into this, whatever this was. But the room felt different now. The air was heavy, as if the very walls were pressing in on him. The house was no longer just a place. It was part of the curse, part of the trap. Ben's gaze flicked to the radio, which sat silently in the corner, its once innocent presence now a constant reminder of the twisted fate awaiting him. Then, without warning, the radio crackled to life. The voices, those endless, distorted whispers, filled the air. It wasn't the soft static he had grown accustomed to. It was loud, urgent, the sound of people speaking, but not in any language he could understand. The voices bled together, merging into an unintelligible chorus. The hairs on the back of Ben's neck stood on end as the room seemed to distort, the air warping like a heat wave rising off the ground. No, Ben gasped, his hands reaching to cover his ears, but it was no use. The sound flooded his mind. Ben. The voice was clear, unmistakable. Marla. She wasn't just in his head anymore. She was in the room with him, her voice bleeding through the static, every word drenched in desperation. Ben, listen to me. You have to stop. Ben turned, his breath catching in his throat as the walls around him began to ripple, the room shaking as if caught in the throes of an earthquake. A figure began to take shape in the corner of the room, flickering like an old film reel. At first, it was a blur, a shadow of a woman, her outline shrouded in static. But then, piece by piece, the details began to emerge. It was her, Marla. Her eyes were wide with terror, and her mouth opened as if to scream. But no sound came. Instead, her image distorted, flickering in and out, her voice still begging. Ben, the radio, it's a trap, don't. The air grew thick, and for a moment, Ben felt as if he were drowning. His chest tightened, the pressure building until it was hard to breathe. His mind screamed for escape, but there was nowhere to go. The room seemed to be shifting, the floor warping like water beneath his feet. No, you don't understand, Ben shouted, clenching his fists. I can't. I can't stop it. I don't know how. But as soon as the words left his mouth, everything changed. The world around him twisted violently. The walls cracked open, and in the jagged space between the broken edges of reality, something stepped through. At first, it was a blur, just a shadow, a figure moving against the darkness. But as it stepped closer, Ben felt a cold chill bite at his skin. It was not a person. It was something other, something made of darkness and static, its form constantly shifting, twisting in ways that were impossible to follow. The thing that emerged was vast, endless. It was the other side. Ben's heart raced as it loomed closer, its cold eyes locking onto his. The presence of it was suffocating. Its very being filled the room, filled his mind. A presence that defied everything Ben had ever known. This was what had been waiting for him. The voice in the static, the thing that had been calling his name, pulling him into the radio's grasp. You, the voice of the creature said, but it wasn't in words. It was a feeling, a gnawing hunger in the pit of Ben's stomach. The hunger was familiar. It was the same sensation he'd felt every time the radio played, every time the voices whispered his name. The being spoke again, but this time the words were clearer. You are the last. Ben's body froze, the blood draining from his face. He didn't understand. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to be the one to fulfill the pact. But then, the realization hit him with a sickening clarity. The pact wasn't just about blood. It was about time. Ben had already crossed the line. He had broken the rules. He had tuned past the forbidden frequency. He had let himself be pulled into the static. And now, the other side had come for him. Marla's voice echoed again, this time louder, clearer, desperate. Ben, you have to listen to me. The pact, it's not just about the radio. It's about the souls it feeds on. It's about you. But before he could react, the static flared up again, and Ben found himself falling, his vision spiraling into darkness. Ben woke in a cold sweat, his chest heaving as though he had been submerged underwater and pulled back to the surface. His skin crawled as the air around him felt unnaturally still, oppressive weight of the night's events hanging like a shroud. The room around him was wrong. The walls seemed to shimmer, as though they were no longer made of solid matter. They rippled like the surface of a pond disturbed by an unseen hand, distorting the light. The corners of the room stretched and contracted, and for a brief moment, Ben thought he could hear a faint murmur, a distant hum that sounded like old machinery. The air was thick with the scent of dust and rot, a smell so overpowering it made his stomach churn. But it wasn't just the air. There was something else, something far more disturbing, something familiar. The town. Ben's pulse quickened as he stood, his legs unsteady, the dizziness from the strange vision in the house still lingering. He turned toward the window, expecting the view of the street outside. Instead, his heart dropped as he stared into an empty void. The streetlights, the familiar houses, none of them were there. In their place was a landscape cloaked in shadow, as though the entire world had been swallowed up by darkness. And then, faintly, in the distance, he saw it. The outline of buildings. Streets that felt impossibly familiar. It was the town, the one he had heard about on the radio. The one that was supposed to be gone. But there it was, standing just outside his window like a ghost from a long-forgotten past. He blinked. The image didn't fade. It was real, too real. The town that no one should remember, was back. Ben's breath caught in his throat as he stumbled toward the door. The house around him creaked and groaned as if alive, the walls shifting again as if they couldn't decide where they were supposed to be. He stepped outside, and the chill hit him immediately. The fog had rolled in thicker than ever, obscuring the familiar scenery of his suburban neighborhood. But what stood in the distance wasn't just any fog. It was the town, rising up out of the mist like a fevered dream. The buildings were blurred, faint at first, but as Ben moved closer, the details began to sharpen. The small brick houses with crooked windows, the rusted lampposts that flickered on their own. It was the town from the radio, the town that had been buried in the mine collapse all those years ago. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps behind him, distant at first, then growing louder until they were unmistakable. People were walking through the mist, figures that looked as though they were dressed in the style of the 1950s. Women in poodle skirts, men in fedoras. But their faces were indistinct, like they were half-formed, their features lost to time, only visible in flashes. They didn't acknowledge him. They didn't even look at him. They were walking as though they were going somewhere, but the path they walked wasn't clear. Ben's heart raced as he moved closer, his feet heavy on the ground, his mind screaming for him to stop. But he couldn't pull away. He had to know. Then he saw them. At the center of the mist, a large building stood, its walls crumbling and its roof caved in. The remnants of a once proud town hall. The place where the fire had started. The place where the disaster had begun. Ben's breath caught as he noticed something else. There, standing at the foot of the stairs, was a figure. A woman. The same woman who had been calling his name. Marla. She was there, standing as if waiting for him, her eyes hollow, her face gaunt and pale. She was looking right at him, but it wasn't the woman Ben had seen before. This was a version of her that was lost, trapped somewhere between the past and the present, a reflection of everything that had been consumed by the curse. Ben, her voice echoed, a broken whisper carried on the wind. You have to destroy it. You have to stop them. Her words cut through him like a blade. The town, the curse, the pact. It was all coming together now. Ben could feel it in his bones, the weight of the town's history pressing in on him. The figures behind him continued to walk, oblivious to his presence. They were ghosts, echoes of the past, stuck in an endless loop, replaying the events that had sealed their fate. And now, it seemed, they were reaching out for him. He turned to look back at the town hall. Marla was still standing there, her hands outstretched, urging him to come closer. Ben felt his pulse pounding in his ears, the world spinning as the fog thickened around him. The closer he moved to the town hall, the more vivid everything became. The voices from the past, the distorted whispers of the townspeople, the screams of those who had died in the fire. He reached out, his fingers trembling as he touched the edge of the broken stairs. The moment his hand made contact with the worn stone, a surge of pain shot through him, a raw, searing pain that felt like it was tearing him apart from the inside. Marla's voice screamed in his ear. Ben, don't you understand? It's not just the town. It's you. You're part of it now. And as the words echoed in his mind, Ben understood. The town wasn't just a place. It was a prison, a place where the past had never died, where the curse had never been broken. And now, Ben was part of it. He wasn't just seeing the town return. He was becoming part of it. The cycle was complete. Ben stood at the edge of the crumbling town hall, the weight of everything crashing down on him. The fog hung thick in the air, swirling around his ankles like it was alive, a creeping, suffocating presence. The town, the cursed town, had risen from the ashes, and now, with every step he took, it pulled him deeper into its clutches. The static from the radio had been silent for days, but now it returned, faint at first, as if it were coming from far away. The radio, that damn cursed radio, was calling him again. And this time, Ben knew the truth. It wasn't just listening to the past, it was feeding on it. On him. The radio had become the town's heart, and now that heart was beating for him. For Ben. He could feel it in his veins, in the very air around him. He was part of it. The town, the voices, the curse, it was all bound together. And to escape it, he had to make the ultimate sacrifice. Marla's warning echoed in his mind. The pact. You have to break it, Ben. It's not just the radio. It's the memory of the fire, the regret, the pain. It's all feeding on you, on the last of the bloodline. You are the key. Ben closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The fire, the burning, the screams. They were all there, seared into his memory like a brand. But now, it wasn't just the past he was trying to outrun. It was the future. His future. The fire he had been warned about, the one he had tried to change, was waiting for him, and there was no escaping it. A low growl, like a distant engine starting, vibrated beneath his feet. Ben opened his eyes to see the town hall trembling, its walls cracking as though something was trying to force its way out. The radio static had grown louder, almost deafening, and he knew it was coming for him. The entity, the being born of signal and memory, was ready to claim him. He turned and saw the radio sitting on a stone pedestal, right in the middle of the square. It was the same radio he had inherited, the one that had started this nightmare. Its knobs were flicking of their own accord, the static growing into a chorus of voices. But now, it wasn't just the voices of the past. It was something else, something alive. As he stepped closer, the air turned colder. His breath came out in visible clouds, each one dissipating too quickly, as if being sucked back into the void. The whispers from the radio became clearer, but they weren't just words. They were memories. His memories. Ben. The voice was soft at first. Familiar. A whisper of something he thought he'd forgotten. It was his grandfather's voice. You knew it was coming. You knew the price. The sound of crackling fire filled his ears. The radio's static deepened, warping and twisting the voices until they became unrecognizable. Ben, you were never meant to change the future. You were meant to complete it. Ben's stomach churned as his grandfather's voice broke into laughter, a low, haunted sound that echoed through the fog. But then, another voice, one that wasn't his grandfather's, cut through the noise. Ben, please, stop. Marla. Her voice was strained, desperate. It sounded like she was suffocating, trapped in the same cycle as the others. He reached for the radio, his hand shaking. The moment his fingers brushed the cold metal, an electric shock surged through him, almost knocking him to the ground. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he was no longer standing in the square. He was standing in the past, in the town as it had been before the fire. He could hear the whispers of the townspeople, their voices urgent and frightened. He could smell the smoke, feel the heat pressing in around him. And in the center of it all, he saw them, the miners, the ones who had made the pact with the entity that had created the radio. They were standing together, their eyes hollow and vacant, as they sealed the curse with a promise made in blood. Ben understood then. The pact wasn't just about the radio, it was about the souls of the town. The fire hadn't been an accident. It had been the beginning, a ritual to bind the town, to trap its residents in a loop of time and memory, feeding the entity with their regrets and pain. And now, Ben was the final piece, the last bloodline. He was the one who would complete the cycle. His chest tightened, the weight of his choices crashing down on him. There was no escape. Not without destroying the radio, the source of it all. The very thing that had given him the ability to hear the past, the future, and the voices that had haunted him for so long. With a final, resolute breath, Ben turned the knob on the radio, tuning it past the forbidden frequency. The world shifted. The sky darkened, and the ground beneath him began to tremble. The air became thick, charged with static, as though the fabric of reality itself was beginning to tear. The voices, his own voice, began to scream through the radio. Help! He heard himself cry. I can't stop it. I can't. Then came the roar. A deafening crack of thunder, followed by the searing heat of a firestorm. Ben felt the flames licking at his skin, the heat growing unbearable. His body screamed in agony, but he pushed forward, reaching into the static. And then, silence. Everything stopped. The fire was gone. The screams faded. The fog cleared. Ben was standing in the square, the town hall crumbling around him. The radio lay in front of him, its knobs spinning wildly as if it were alive. But now there were no voices, no static. The curse was broken. The town was gone. The curse was lifted. And yet, as Ben stood there, staring at the empty space where the town had once been, he realized that he was alone. There was no one left to remember, no one to acknowledge what had happened. He turned to leave, but then he heard it, a soft whisper in the distance. His name, Ben. He froze. The voice was his. It came from the radio. The cycle hadn't ended. It had changed. And now Ben was the one trapped in the static. He reached for the radio one last time, but as his fingers touched it, everything went black.